Dallas One, how are you doing today, man? I'm super excited to be here with you guys. I have an unorthodox thing to actually speak about today. Prayed about it, really believe that this was the way the Lord was leading for my time here with you. So, in the next few moments, the topic is actually going to be forgiveness. And you're wondering, like, man, you coming for a company, you're talking about forgiveness. What is the reason behind it? Well, for a Christian company, I believe forgiveness should be one of the most upward things that can happen in a company. From a business standpoint, as many of you would know, leading any organization, you know, the majority of the time individuals quit bosses instead of actual jobs. And one of the things that happens in there is that there's enmity between people. There are arguments between people that don't necessarily get resolved. So the question I have for you today, Dallas One, before we go into the scripture, is: have you ever worked with somebody that you did not like? Have you ever worked with someone that you did not like? And I'm happy we're on Zoom. That way, no one is looking around like, hey, guy over there. No need to point. We all know who that guy is, right? Or that lady. But the question is, have you ever worked with someone that you didn't like? And if you have, man, what was going to work like for you? What was that whole mood of showing up and seeing that person? How do they affect your job? How do they affect being at your job? How did that affect your mental well-being? And here is one of the next questions is: what was the reason why you didn't like them? Was it a personality trait? Did something happen between you two? Was there some unforgiveness that maybe you didn't like the way how they reported something? Whatever the reason may be, working with people is very important, especially when you work with people. And I want to share a story with you right out the Bible where Jesus talks about forgiveness. And this story is surrounded by stories of forgiveness. So my hope today is that if you ever have to work with someone that you don't like, that you'll be able to find solace in the scriptures of God and find a middle ground. The cool part about this story is it also applies to your life and your families. So you can take this and bring it there as well. Well, enough of the Bible. If you have an iPhone, Android, the Lord is still, He still loves you. If you have an iPad or anything, let's go to Matthew chapter 18. And we're going to be reading from verses 23 down. This is a pretty cool story. So I'm asking that you stay with me on it, right? We're going to read the entire story. Now, here's what it is. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. And when he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. So you can say that's about 1,010,000 gold bags, which is really unpayable. So since he could not pay, his masters ordered him to be sold, and his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me. I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him of the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, which is far less than the 100 bags of gold that he owed this king. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed. And they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you of all the debt because you pleaded with me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your hearts. Man, that is heavy, isn't it? But isn't that normally the story of life? We love to receive forgiveness, but oftentimes it can be hard for us to forgive. So, all of this I want to sum up with one single statement, which is going to come off as a question, and I hope you can remember. And here is what it is. Dallas One, do you want to make a point or would you like to make a difference? Do you want to make a point? Would you like to make a difference? Now, the two is very, very different. You see, whenever we're trying to make a point, We're trying to allow someone to know that you are not going to do something to me and get away with it. Whenever we're trying to make a point, someone does us something wrong, we're like, hey, I'm going to get you back. And I know we're all saved, most of us, and we work at a Christian company, but one of the most enjoyable things in life is a good payback. When someone does something wrong to you and you have the chance to pay them back, it feels good for a moment. That's why Jesus said you shouldn't repay an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. So whenever you're trying to make a point, it's about making sure the other person know that you have control, that you are the one that they have to deal with if something wrong happens. When you're trying to make a difference, it's a little bit different. When you're trying to make a difference, it's not about showing your superiority. It's not about showing that you are the man or the woman or that you're in full control. It's really about showing your humility and your meekness and reflecting Jesus Christ. Because if we can be honest, the story teaches us two things. Number one, it teaches about forgiveness. And number two, it teaches us about the price that Christ has paid for us. So let's deal with the first one. Do you want to make a difference or are you trying to make a point? How should we handle our conflicts? Well, the first thing that we should do is to realize that maybe we need to lower our expectations of people. That sounds like such a harsh statement, especially when you work with people. But I was once told this: if you live long enough, people will fail you. So when it happens, it should not be any surprise that something is going on. But that story goes on a little bit further. Is how you react when people don't do what you want them to do that dictates the kind of person that you are and the kind of a leader that you are. Now, Dallas One is a great company, and everyone listening to me right now, I can imagine the fact that you're here right now at 7 something in the morning. You are amazing people, but I want to encourage you today that if someone has done something to offend you, someone has done or have done or is currently doing something to offend you, I'm asking you to make a difference. Now, it's one thing to be offended, and it's one thing to stay offended. So, how do you reconcile the two? Well, the story says it right there. When you're in a jam, like there's 1,000 bag of gold that you owe. And here is what I love about the story. Nowhere in the story is a debt excused. That simply means that what you did, you have to kind of fess up for what happened, right? No one is saying, oh, what you did isn't important or it has no value or there's no course of action that should be taken. No, that story does not signify that. Something is owed and something needs to be paid. Someone did something to you and something needs to be done about it. What the story highlights is the mercy and the grace by which someone goes about doing the process. So we're not saying don't act like nothing happened. We're saying it's all about how you act out what happened. So in the story, the servant comes and he pleads for forgiveness and he pleads for patience and say, please be patient with me. I'm going to give you what you owe, what I owe you. I'm going to pay you back. And he gives them mercy. And then he goes out and someone offends him in a far less way. 100 bags of silver, man, a few bags of denarii, right? It's almost like, man, you were excused of a debt of $1,000,000, and then you go find somebody that owes you $10,000, and you're giving them a worse punishment than you receive for not paying somebody back $1,000,000. So of course, he goes and he chokes out the guy who didn't give him his money back and sends him to prison and captures his family. Here's what God is saying, man. How could you come to me and ask me for forgiveness? And I give you patience and I allow you to do it. But when someone comes to you, you give them the maximum penalty for what they deserve. What Jesus is saying is, what Jesus is trying to get across is, you should show others the same grace that I'm showing you. Man, this story comes full circle. Whenever something happens to your children, as we spoke about beforehand, it gets so real. And here's a real life story that happened, right? So my son is 6 years old. His name is Richard, just like my name. We sent our son to school, and then my son comes home and we have the traditional talk. How was school today? What did you learn? And if your kid is anything like my kid, when you say how was school today, it was good. One word answer. What did you learn? Nothing. I'm sorry, we're paying way too much money for private education for you to learn absolutely nothing, right? And we said, well, how was school today? And he said, oh man, someone spit in my face. Wait a minute. Let's back up. What do you mean someone spat in your face? Yeah, Dad, today a student spat in my face. So we turn into Inspector Gadget, right? We start asking questions. Okay, were you playing and maybe you were conversing with someone and a piece of spittle kind of came out of their mouth because they were so energetic and landed on your cheek? And maybe you're considering that a spit in the face? And he was like, no, Dad. I mean, did water spray out of a water bottle during lunchtime and they were speaking in your direction? So maybe the splash from the water is spit? No, Dad. Well, what happened? Dad, somebody actually had spit in their mouth and they spat on me. Woo! Wait a second. You spat on my boy. And what made it worse is we went to pick him up. Did the teacher tell us anything? Oh, no. So we had to find out about an incident from a 6-year-old kid. So, man, I remember I went to the school. Now, if you can imagine, I'm trying to be as calm as possible because I'm a pastor, right? Can't go out there flipping tables like Jesus at your son's school while being the pastor. So you believe. So I went over there, and right when I really wanted to give that teacher a piece of my mind, because messing with me is one thing, but messing with my child and not doing the due diligence is a completely different thing. And then the Lord reminded me of all the offenses that I did and all the ways how maybe I harassed somebody's kid when I was growing up. And how at one point in time I was the accuser, but I received grace for something I did in school one day that should have got me expelled. And I went in there and it completely changed the dynamic of the conversation. Now, what happened? Was it wrong? Absolutely. Did I have a reason to be upset? Absolutely. But am I trying to make a point? Was I interested in making a difference? So I went in to make a difference and I had a conversation with the teachers and the principals. And because of that, some new things were actually put in place to help prevent this from happening to anyone. There was apologies sent out. The kid was disciplined in whatever manner they thought to be well. But the point of the matter is, I handled the situation. The kid was forgiven by my son and the principals and the teachers and I. We had great conversation. A difference was made. Instead of walking out saying, oh man, I showed them who was boss. And I showed them why they should never mess with my kid. The truth of the matter is maybe there's someone in your life today, or maybe someone that you're working with, that has done something wrong against you. And I'm asking you in the last minute that I have, are you interested in making a point? Do you want to make a difference? The second thing that this text shows us is that Jesus paid all the sins for our debt. And the reason why he can give us grace is because his son is the reason why we have that grace. He died for us. And now the word says, if any man were to follow after me, he must deny himself. So that means all the anger, all the rage, all the frustration that we want to show, we must deny that factor. Matter of fact, Jesus said, by this, all men should know that you're my disciples, not by how well you fuss at somebody, but how well you love people. So my prayer is that you take this and you apply it at Dallas One, and you apply it in your homes, and you apply it against your family, and seek to make a difference instead of making a point. Man, thank you guys very much.